welcome to your Self Care Toolkit. This video is intended as a guide through this particular resource, which is part of our AuSM Celebrates Interdependence campaign. The Self Care Toolkit has quite a few tabs and different areas that you can use to help you build a self-care plan. So in order to help you understand how you can use it and the different ways that you can adjust it for your own needs, we made this walkthrough video that will walk us through each one of the areas and share some tips and tricks for using it more effectively. We're going to start right here on the first page. You can find the Self Care Toolkit by going to www.ausm.org and going to the Education section. Under that dropdown, you'll find AuSM Celebrates Interdependence, and you can click on the Independence and Interdependence section to find the link to the Self Care Toolkit. When you first click on it, you will see this welcome page. This is the base camp for your self-care toolkit, and we'll give you a little bit of information about what each section does and how you can use it. What's important to know here is that this particular spreadsheet is locked, and so in order to use it, you're going to have to make a copy of your own. In order to do that, you can come right up to File and just click on Make a Copy. Once you do that, you will have access to all of the different areas, and you can edit it as you need. This just allows us to make it available to more people so that your edits won't become live for other users. Right here on the front page, you can see the table of contents. This lists out the different tabs that you'll find along the bottom and what to do in each area. We will start with the current practice and needs section. To move to a different section, all you have to do is click on that tab right at the bottom of the page. This first section is your current practice and needs. So this is where you can take stock of what you're already doing for your self-care. The first thing to know about all of the sections of the self-care toolkit are that you can feel free to adjust them however you like. This is for you to create a piece that works for you and your needs. And all of the setups and questions are there just to get you started and help you figure out what works for you. So in this section, there are a bunch of different areas of self-care that are listed out with some questions related to each one and a box where you can write down how you're doing right now. So for example, in the physical area, it asks, do you move your body? Do you eat a variety of foods regularly? Do you sleep enough? Do you take meds? And what else do you do to care for your physical body? You can click into the next box right next to those questions and make some notes about how you're doing. So you might say, I run 3 days a week and I feel good about that. I don't eat many fruits and vegetables and I would like to change that. I get regular headaches and want to feel better. Any notes that you want to make about how you're feeling in that area, you can go ahead and take them. You can definitely feel free to highlight what you do well. This is also a place to note the things that you are already doing because you'll want to work those into your self-care plan even as you are thinking of new things to do. So there are quite a few different areas here. You can feel free to adjust them as you want. For example, occupational is one option. If you're still in school, you can feel free to adjust this to educational and change the questions to things that make sense for you. I have split up some of these different sections into more specific areas. So instead of just saying hobbies or personal time, I have it split into relaxing or chilling out and excitement and novelty. I find that for my self-care, it helps to have a balance of things that will make me feel excited and get out of the house, as well as things that make me feel calm and rejuvenated. So I like to split it up that way, but you may prefer not to. So feel free to adjust all of these and to take as many or as few notes as you like. You can also add in some more notes as you go. There are some questions down here at the bottom that will help you identify places where you're feeling particularly stressed and may want to add more support. So you could list work-related stressors, personal stressors, ways you know you're stressed. ways you manage your stress both at work and away from work, and then name some folks who are part of your support system. That's going to be helpful as you move forward in creating your personal plan for self-care. So now that you've taken your self-assessment, you can start thinking about what you might want to do differently. One thing that I'll note here is that you don't have to fill out this whole thing all at once. You might decide to do one tab at a time and take a day or 2 days in between each one so that you have time to decompress and let your thoughts kind of filter through. It can happen entirely at your own pace. But once you've finished thinking about what you're currently doing and what you want to do differently, you can head over into the brainstorming section. This brainstorming section is where you can start thinking about things that you might want to do as part of your self-care. I have listed each of the areas that we had in that current practice and needs section right here, so that you can come up with an idea for each one and think about what you might want to do for self-care in that area. There's no reason that you have to do simply one of each. I just listed these out so that you could remember them, but you can feel free to say, no, I feel pretty good about my physical self-care, and just go ahead and delete that. You may also decide, oh, I really am struggling with my social self-care. And so you might say, I want quite a few social options, and just write that in there a number of times and put different ideas next to each one. So it might be coffee with parents. It might be happy hour with coworkers. It might be calling a friend. I like to have each one on its own line so that I can think about each one independently. But you can, again, adjust this however you want to. The other thing that I have here for you is to note how often you think you might want to do this piece of self-care. I personally like having that note so that I can think about how many things I'm trying to add to my calendar, or how regularly I'd want to do something in order for it to be helpful. So for example, if we're thinking about sensory needs and our sensory self-care, I have a really strong need for vestibular and proprioceptive input. So I really like spinning, I like being upside down, I like balancing, I like deep pressure, all of those types of things. Let's say that I want to use a weighted blanket as my self-care. If I only do that once a month, it's probably not going to make a huge difference. So I want to think about how often it's going to take for this particular piece of self-care to be helpful. In addition, I'll also want to think about how often I actually am going to do it. So for example, you'll see in this example section under social, one of the options is play Dungeons and Dragons. You might know that Dungeons and Dragons requires other people and can be a fairly long thing. It might take a couple of hours. So once a week is the most that I think that I can do that. And I'm not going to try and do it more often than that because it will be too much of an imposition and too difficult. So I want to do something that is going to be practical for me, but will also then make a difference. You can feel free to add as many ideas in here as you want. And to make notes as you go. So you might add some columns here after you've tried out some of these ideas. Say, you know, how did it go? Do I want to do it more often? Something like that. And then make notes for yourself as you go. One helpful thing for this brainstorming section is that the very next tab right here at the bottom is called Ideas. And this has a bunch of different suggestions of things that you might want to use for your self-care in all of the different areas that we've broken down. Again, these don't have to be your areas, but they're how I've chosen to organize this particular resource. So I have about 20 for each area. That's not true, about 15 for each area. And you can go ahead and take a look at them and use them as ideas or use them as inspiration for what you might want to do. So for example, if you know, based on your current needs and practice assessment, that you're really struggling in the area of your spirituality, your values, and your purpose, you can come over here to the ideas section and say, what are some thoughts about what I might do for self-care here? You could volunteer, you could do a random act of kindness, you could help someone with a task, you could attend religious services or practice your religious traditions or pray. You could read literature related to your values or spirituality, donate to a charity, call or reach out to someone you care about just to say hi, read a religious text, and perhaps from a tradition that you don't practice, just to learn more about how other people approach spirituality, or write a letter to your higher power. So those are all ideas, and maybe they spark something new in you. Maybe one of them sounds good to you, but you can feel free to grab those ideas from here and pop them into your brainstorming section. Once you've finished brainstorming, and one thing to note is that brainstorming is a place to just dump all of your ideas. So for now, just drop in everything that you think might be a useful self-care idea. Anything you think you might want to try out for your self-care. Because the next thing we're going to do is actually put together a plan. And I do that in the weekly layout. So the weekly layout is where I start to chunk out when I'm going to do different self-care activities and make sure that I don't have too many things happening in one area or at one time. So I've created space to do 3 or 4 different self-care things each day. You can always add more or less. It's really up to you. But the way that I would use this is I would go to my brainstorming section and say, all right, I want to journal 2 times a week. Let me think about which days of the week I'm going to do that. I would head to my weekly layout and say, I think that I am going to journal on Thursday, and I think that I'm going to journal on Sunday. And then I can say, I think I want that to be first thing in the morning. And that is my spirituality. As you start to fill this in, you'll notice which areas you have a lot of self-care options and which ones you don't have very many. For clarity, if you want to add another task to Sunday, you'll just come over to this second set of columns and maybe you'll say, I want to eat a salad on Sundays. And that will be for dinner and that will be my physical area. So you can see what you have planned for each day as well as sort of the week as a whole. In addition to that, there are these 2 sections at the bottom that are daily and monthly. So if there's something that you want to do every day, you can just put it in this daily section. And I find that a little bit easier than adding it to every single individual day. Or if there's something that you want to do slightly less often, only monthly, you can stick it in this monthly section. Again, if there are other ways that you want to organize your thoughts here about how often you're going to do things or when you're going to do them, feel free to use the extra space at the bottom to create your own layouts. I personally like to use this weekly layout so that I can either print it or have it available to me during my day-to-day and know what I have planned for that day for my self-care, as well as to make sure that I'm not overwhelming myself. I really wouldn't recommend adding more than 4 self-care ideas for each day, because you're going to find that you are spending a lot of time trying to keep track of all of this. So even though self-care is incredibly important, you don't want to overwhelm yourself with too many things to do. It also helps me to spread out when I'm doing things. So instead of doing all of my self-care on a Monday and then forgetting about it for the rest of the week, I can spread it nicely throughout the week so that I feel cared for each day. In addition to this weekly layout, I also have what's called a crisis plan. So the weekly layout is the self-care that you would do regularly to try and keep your mood and your self-esteem boosted all the time. But we all know that there are times when things don't really go well, times when things become overwhelming and you do end up in a crisis or a meltdown. That's where this crisis plan comes into place. So this is where you're going to write down things that will be helpful to you when you are having a really hard time. I personally really like having this crisis plan for a couple of reasons. The first one is so that I know what I can do when I'm very overwhelmed. It helps me to look at my list and say, here are the things that I can do to feel a little bit better. I also like it because I can share it with the other people that I know who are in my support system, and that will help them to know what is helpful to me, what not to do, and how to pick up on signs that I am heading towards crisis. So I've created the columns here in order to reflect those uses, but again, feel free to add more categories if you want to. These lists can be as long or as short as you want them to be. They don't have to be the same length. And so you can think about each one independently. I like to think about what my sensory needs are when I am in crisis. I put that one first because for me, sensory needs are really what underpins my ability to recover from a crisis or a meltdown. So if I am melting down, the first thing I do is try to meet my sensory needs because that really helps to even out my emotions and get me back to a place where I can start to manage my needs again. So as an example, I have a weighted blanket here, but I might also put taking a hot bath. I might put cuddling with my cats. I might put drinking some hot chocolate. So I have a big list of the different options of things that I can do when I'm feeling in crisis to help manage those sensory needs. I also have distractions. One thing that I know is true when I am in crisis is that I'm not in a place to directly manage or approach my emotions. And instead, distracting myself from what is immediately happening can help me to calm down, even out, and then get back to a place where I can manage those difficult emotions. So I have leaving the house as an option. I could also put reading a book or playing a video game, talking to a friend, any variety of things that are going to be distracting enough that I'm not going to keep falling into whatever thoughts are really overwhelming me at that time. I also have safe places so that if I do need to leave my house, I can go somewhere else and feel safe and comfortable there. One thing you'll notice under distractions is that getting out of my house is one of those distractions. And that is why it is important for me to have safe places to go when I am in crisis. I've also written down people. When you are in crisis, sometimes you need to have support folks who can really help you out during that time. So I like to make a list of the people that I can reach out to when I'm in that overwhelmed space. It's much easier than in the moment trying to think, who can I talk to? Who can I call? Who will it be appropriate for me to call? So instead of doing that when I'm melting down and overwhelmed, I do it when I'm calm, when I'm collected, when I am using my sort of more rational mind. And then all I have to do is go back to my list and pull someone at that moment. This is also where I write down what's helpful from other people so that if I do go and ask someone for help, I can either give them specific ideas or tell them what not to do. So for me, I do not like to be touched when I am having a meltdown. And so I would add not touching, giving space into this, what is helpful from others. I also add in what to avoid because I know that there are times where I am in crisis and I do something because it seems like it's going to feel good in the moment, but it actually makes things worse. So, for example, listening to sad music when I'm feeling very down, sometimes I think it will feel good to listen to really sad music and kind of wallow, but I know that that's going to make me feel worse in the long run. So, having this reminder that's actually written down and I know that I've thought about it can help me to choose something that's going to be better. And last, I also have signs of crisis. This is really to help me catch before I hit a point where I'm really overwhelmed and really spiraling. So if I can figure out what it is that comes before I hit that crisis mode or that meltdown or that overload, I can start to intervene sooner. This is something that you might have to start filling out over time as you have really overwhelming experiences, you might then notice, oh, I was doing this immediately beforehand. And that's a good sign that I can look to in the future so that I can pick up on when I'm about to be in crisis. So for me, I know that if I'm avoiding socializing, if I have plans to be with somebody and I choose not to do them, that's a sign that I might be heading into a bad direction. And when I notice that, then I can go back to my weekly self-care and add a little bit more in there. Think about what I can do to really boost that self-care a little bit more so that I don't make it to crisis. That's why I have the crisis plan, but again, you can add whatever you want or need in this section. The last major area is creating a physical kit. So one of the things that can be very helpful when you are thinking about self-care is physical items that will support your self-care. I like to think of my physical kit in both the crisis area and in the sort of ongoing regular self-care area. So I might have a kit that I have at home for when I have a crisis that I can pull out and use. And I might also have a kit that I take with me so that I have all of the materials that I need to do my self-care in the day-to-day with me at all times. I came up with some different areas that were helpful for me to remind myself of what types of self-care I might want items to help with. Again, you might have other ones. So reminders are often very helpful for me. I like to have notes of things. I like to have reminders of how I can reframe difficult situations. And so having those as part of my self-care kit is very helpful. Sensory input is a huge area that I think a lot of us can use in our physical kit. So it might be earplugs or noise canceling headphones. It might be a fidget. It might be something to chew on, but whatever it is that you need for your sensory input. And you can think about that based on the brainstorming that you did in the other section right over here. You can put that in your physical kit. You might also have comfort items. So for me, it's a copy of a specific book, but for you, it might be a Squishmallow, or it might be a particular trading card, anything that when you look at it or see it or think about it, it makes you feel a little bit more calm. It can also be helpful to have any medications or health things that you need on a regular basis in your physical kit. So I know that I am pretty consistently dehydrated, so I have a water bottle that is always with me. If you are somebody who has medication that they take sort of in acute circumstances, if you have medication for panic attacks or something like that, you would probably want to include that in your physical kit. You might also want something that allows you a little bit of artistic expression or creativity, something to keep you occupied or interested if you have to wait somewhere or if you need a distraction. So I put a coloring book because I find that a nice way to kind of zone out or feel more comfortable when I am in a new or difficult situation. You may also want something spiritual so that if you are struggling with meaning or purpose or values in that moment, you can have something to kind of hold on to and come back to. So for me, that might be a book of poetry. Last, I have body care. So for me, that's a snack, a protein bar. You might have something else that helps you to meet your body's needs. It might be other kinds of snacks. It might be something like headache medication. All kinds of things could fit in there. So when I'm creating my physical kit, I like to have one place that I can put all of these things. For me, that tends to be my car because I'm almost always going to be taking my car if I'm leaving my house, but you might have them in a small bag or in your purse so that everything is right there and you don't have to worry about whether you have all of the items you need in order to do your self-care. In addition to that, you may also have a secondary one that you keep at home that is your crisis physical kit. And that might look a little bit different. It would probably have items for all of the different areas that are included in your crisis plan. The next thing that I want to look at is this example list. So within my personal self-care toolkit, I have a couple of different lists that help me to know who I can reach out to, think about the different tools that I have at my disposal, and so on. Personally, I just find it hard to keep track of things unless they're written down. So for me, having a list of who I can reach out to if I want help in my self-care was very helpful. This is just an example, but you might come up with other lists that you want to stick into your self-care toolkit. I know that I've had one of things to do when I'm bored, or ways that I can move my body that feel good to me, or my safe foods, or different routines. So think about anything that you might want to be able to refer to over and over, and that's a great thing to make a list of. So in this case, I made a list of different people and then different areas that they could help me with so that I know who I can go to in different circumstances. Last but not least, we have the tab for additional resources. So in order to help you out, there are some other ideas here for you to help you fill out different areas of this toolkit. These are generally lists of things that you might want to try out. So for example, I have the sensory schedule linked here. This is another resource from our AuSM Celebrates Interdependence campaign, and it helps you to come up with your particular schedule of what you want to do to meet your sensory needs. It has a ton of ideas for different senses and so on. And so maybe you want to pull out sensory things from the self-care toolkit and keep that in its own area in this sensory schedule. There's also a big list of ideas for self-care for your body and mindfulness exercises. So those might be areas to get ideas as you are coming up with your brainstorms and as you're building up your weekly layout. I also have suggestions of socializing. I know that it can be hard to come up with new ways to socialize, or what to do when you reach out to somebody, and what should you suggest? You have somebody that maybe is a friend or an acquaintance, and you want to have make a suggestion for what to do when you hang out, and that could be challenging. So this is a nice list of ideas so that you don't have to come up with all of those on your own. There's also a list of hobbies that you might want to try out. If you're like me and you like to try new things and you're very curious, you might find that you're always looking for new things to try out. So this list of hobbies is a great place to go. And then last, there is a list of relaxing self-care ideas. So if you struggle to think of things that will sort of calm down your nervous system and let you feel relaxed and chill, this is a great place to go. It has a ton of ideas. So this is our self-care toolkit. I highly recommend that if you are interested in using it, you take some time to customize it to your own needs and wants. It can be a little bit overwhelming when you're first looking at it, but again, you don't need to work through all of it at once. And in fact, you don't need to work through all of it at all. If there's any section that you don't like to use, feel free to just get rid of it. I hope that this is a helpful resource for you as you are thinking about your self-care in your life. And as always, if you have any questions or concerns or suggestions, please don't hesitate to reach out to zjames@ausm.org. I would love to hear from you.